I missed you at the table when you first come in, there is a sign-in sheet. It helps us keep track of you. No, just kidding. We just like to send you messages to say, hey, don't forget about the next Engage Durango forum. So my name is Clancy Nixon. I'm the Community Engagement Specialist for the City of Durango. And I'm gonna, before I get too far, I'm gonna invite Olivia DePablo up here to say a few words. Olivia DePablo does interpretation for us, Spanish interpretation to be specific. And so the city is really trying to make some headway with language justice in our presentations, and so I'll turn it over to her to introduce herself.
Buenas tardes, good evening. Hace calor. What does that mean? I wanted to start with a fun activity, but my name is Olivia De Pablo, and I am the Language Justice Coordinator in town on the La Plata Free Equity Coalition. I also work with the City of Durango as an interpreter. Today, I want to thank the City of Durango for opening the spaces to be able to speak the language of our hearts, even though we may not have just yet people that are monolingual that are here. We're building it, and that's how. With your blessing, I'm going to repeat the same step, Español, which is my language of my heart. Buenas tardes, soy Olivia, estoy muy agradecida por estar acá. Muchas gracias por permitir abrir espacios lingüísticos y poder hablar el idioma del corazón. Thank you for having me.
In addition to having Olivia here, we also have childcare for those of you who may need it. I saw some kiddos in the room earlier. I think they may be already headed over there. But we have Alyssa back here, and then her fellow child care worker, Harper, is also over in the children's library. So just know that that's a resource that we're trying for most of our public meetings. So with that, you are here for the Engage Durango Forum. These happen every other month with a different topic for our presentation. So this one is all about sustainability. Marty Poole, our sustainability manager, is going to be giving the presentation this evening. It'll be about 15 minutes, followed by a shorter question and answer session, so about 15 minutes there as well. And then from there, we'll break out. It's really casual. You'll be able to mill about the room and chat with our departmental leaders, most of our departmental leaders, if not staff that are here in their stead. So that's all how we lay this out tonight. It goes from 5 to 6:30. In case you missed it, there's food in the back. And then before you leave tonight, we do have QR codes on that entry table, and then at the end of his presentation, for asking you how we did with the forum. We want to get your feedback about how you felt about the evening. But this is all about getting feedback from you and being able to open the lines of communication, put some faces to our staff so you know who to contact if you have any kudos or concerns to express with the city. So thank you all very much for being here. I'm going to turn it over to Marty.
Thanks, Clancy, and thank you everyone for coming tonight. Sustainability encompasses a lot, so I will do my best to cover the highlights we have here with the City of Durango and through our community projects programs. I do not want to hop on Teams right now. I didn't even ask to do that. Highlights from the past year or so, things that we're currently working on, things we have our eye on, but there's a lot to cover. So if I don't touch on something that you've heard about or are curious about, I'm certainly happy to answer that during the Q&A. And then after the Q&A, during the open time when you have a chance to talk to other departments and directors, I will certainly still be around to chat more. So the City of Durango adopted our most recent sustainability plan in the summer of 2022. And it is a framework for sustainability throughout our community. So certainly the city overseeing that and coordinating that work, but it is a community-wide sustainability plan. It has that input from the community. The vision for a sustainable Durango is that we are a community committed to achieving carbon neutrality, preserving our natural environment, conserving resources, maintaining our unique character, and improving quality of life for the benefit of present and future generations, of residents, visitors, and neighboring communities. The overarching priorities of the sustainability plan are an emphasis on reducing greenhouse gas emissions and increasing renewable electricity generation, preparing Durango to be more resilient to the impacts of climate change, securing the health and well-being benefits that are gained from reduced pollution and improved natural systems, and then implementing all of the sustainability work in an equitable manner. You'll notice as I go through this is very much centered on an environmental sustainability plan. So we are leading with that environmental context through our work of sustainability here at the city. There are 5 sectors that are outlined in the plan, and I emphasize that sustainability can be very context driven, right? So for instance, you don't see anything here about like sea level rise because we don't have an ocean in Durango. Sea level rise is certainly a concern when it comes to climate change and sustainability in certain communities, but sustainability again is context specific, and in this case it is also the context of a local community and a local municipality, a local government, how we can engage in sustainability efforts. So this is by no means all of what sustainability may mean to everyone, but it is how we have framed it in our planning as the city of Durango in our coordination with our community as a whole. So I'll go through these 5 areas, touching on highlights we have from the past year and have going on, and then also some important indicators and metrics that we keep our eye on in terms of seeing the progress that we're making as a community. So in the area of energy, some highlights here. We just finished completion of our energy performance contract, which was a over $5 million project for energy efficiency and solar energy at City of Durango facilities. That is projected to have over $200,000 of energy savings per year, has ongoing energy management services. In fact, we have our contractors from McKinstry here to talk about some of those during the Q&A if you're interested, or during the open house portion. And really just shows the city's commitment to aligning our municipal operations and facilities with what everyone can be doing in our community around energy efficiency and renewable energy. Certainly ongoing coordination with La Plata Electric Association. When it comes to energy and our impact on sustainability, energy is by far the highest source of our greenhouse gas emissions in our community. It's over 60%. And so, not just our community, but all communities around the world, the path that seems to be pretty clear at this point for reducing greenhouse gas emissions is to shift our electrical grid to more renewable resources, eventually 100% renewable resources, and then shift our energy consumption to be electrical. And there's certainly things that may continue to use fossil fuels, but that would then require carbon sequestration and other technologies. And so the clearest and fastest and most accessible approach for achieving greenhouse gas emissions reductions in our community is through electrification and energy efficiency and renewable energy. And so the coordination with LPA is going to be paramount in that space. There is a lot of state and federal grant funding available, historic amounts of state and grant funding available for renewable energy, energy efficiency, and electrification. And so we are working very hard to keep tabs on those opportunities and capitalize on them. In fact, energy performance contract has over $2 million of grants and rebates associated with federal and state funding. So tracking a lot of the work that's being done at the state on energy code, advancements in requiring more energy efficiency and electrification, solar ready, and looking to do a pilot program for thermostat replacements. And you might think that's like small potatoes, but actually programmable thermostats and managing heating and cooling in space is one of the top ways most low-hanging fruit, easiest ways to save energy in buildings and thus reduce greenhouse gas emissions. I'm going to go through the data really quickly. So per capita electric consumption is decreasing slightly, ever so slightly. Per capita natural gas consumption is actually increasing slightly. Every year, we have been steadily installing new on-site, more and more on-site renewables within city limits. And you'll see that in 2023, we doubled the amount of on-site renewable that was installed in 1 year. And as a result, on-site renewable now represents about 5% of our electricity consumption in the city. Then there's utility scale renewables and things like that that contribute to the emissions associated with our grid. So we're somewhere between, we're getting close to 40-ish% renewable electricity for our electricity consumption when you plug something in. So we've come a long way. Still have a long way to go, but we've come a long way. In transportation development patterns, sustainability is all centered around reducing the reliance on single occupancy vehicles, which take up space, and also traditional vehicles burn fossil fuels, right? And so there are safety, congestion, land use, and certainly greenhouse gas emissions issues associated with having a community that's centered around reliance on people driving by themselves in cars. And so sustainability transportation is about shifting away from that paradigm. Our transportation department and our public works and streets department do a ton in this area. We just adopted an updated multimodal transportation plan that guides a ton of this work, very progressive in that area for a community of our size and location. We're in the middle of a very successful e-bike rebate program, incentivizing other ways to get around aside from using vehicles. We saw transit ridership drastically increase back beyond pre-pandemic levels. We adopted our parking management plan with a center around transportation and parking demand management, and not just building more parking and using more parking for more land area for cars. And we're continuing to see rapid growth in EV charging. So here's our transit ridership. You can see we have officially rebounded from the pandemic. We did it. But I think it's not just the rebound and getting back to normal, right, post-pandemic, but it is all of the effort from our transit program and expanding those services. And really, there are a large portion of our community that is reliant on transit to work and go to school in our community. They can't afford a car, they don't have a license, and so this is very important for our economy and for our community to have this service. This is the increase in EV charging sessions, and this is just city-owned stations, which the city-owned stations comprise about 15% of the stations in our region. There's about 40 or 50 charging stations. The city now owns and manages 10, including Durango's only 2 fast chargers, and it's an exponential increase in charging. And so we are living through the transition from fossil fuel vehicles to electric vehicles. If your current car is an electric vehicle, there's a very, very good chance your next car will be an electric vehicle. It is incredible how fast this transition is occurring. Consumption waste is all about reduce, reuse, recycle. We're expanding leaf collections through fall cleanup, we have a partnership contract with Table to Farm for opt-in curbside compost collections. We're tracking the bag fee, or it's called the Plastic Pollution Reduction Act, that was passed at the state level. So that's the ban and fee on hello? Did it?
I'll get you another one.
All right, thanks.
Better be out in the meantime.
I can do that. So the Plastic Pollution Reduction Act is the bag fees and ban as a state mandate, but it is managed and implemented and enforced by local governments. We're looking into diverting our biosolids from Santa Rita. So instead of sending those biosolids to landfill, seeing how they can be composted and reused for some type of land application, organic application. And the household hazardous waste is a partnership we do with La Plata County every other year currently, funded by the joint sales tax, and so that is slated for this fall. It's really the best and in some cases the only opportunity to dispose of toxic or flammable or corrosive materials and keep those materials out of the landfill. Per capita, so a note on the data we have for waste collections. It is more challenging than other data to get for a variety of reasons. We have good data on city services. We don't have great data on private hauling. So if someone just, construction company takes their waste to the dump, or the private haulers that businesses may use to pick up their trash and recycle, we don't have great data on that because they're not required to give it to us. And so the data you'll see here, there's a note that commercial hauling and construction waste is not included in this data, which admittedly is a gap in the data. And depending on who is signed up for city services specifically can affect this data. But for the services that the city of Durango, as a recycling and trash collections provides, we are seeing a very slight decrease in per capita waste sent to the landfill. We were seeing a slight decrease in our recycling diversion rates over the past several years, and then we saw a big increase when Table to Farm started to really expand their composting services. So this is the total landfill diversion rate, essentially all the recycling and composting that is not going to the landfill. So roughly 40% of our waste is going to be composted or recycled as opposed to going to the landfill by weight. For water, we're continuing water infrastructure improvements to improve tracking and maintaining water quality. We're piloting a turf grass replacement program funded by the Colorado Water Conservation Board this year, aimed at addressing landscaping water consumption and seeing about how we can incentivize people to be more efficient in that space. And we've completed some historical water consumption analysis, which really gives us some good insight on some trends for water in our community, particularly water at the end user. So we've always had good historical data on water treated or water treatment plants, but we're improving the data and insights we have into end user uses for water. So over the past 6 years, if you combine all the primary categories of water, we're seeing pretty flat water consumption. It goes up and down from year to year because sometimes we have dry years, some we have wet years, driven by the need of irrigation. But you can see we have billed indoor use, billed outdoor use. There's a substantial portion of raw water use that's used at certain irrigation facilities. So Fort Lewis College, the sports complex, Hillcrest, Riverview, and the cemetery are all raw water, untreated. It's just diverted from our Florida water supply. And then we have, and this is not unusual for water utilities, although rates vary, but we do have a portion of unaccounted for or loss. So that is the difference between the amount of water we're treating at the wastewater treatment plant versus the amount that we are ultimately billing for. So that could be leaks in the system, it could be billing errors, it could be tracking calibration issues in our measurement and metering. So you'll see that is a portion of what we have to account for as well. About 55 to 60% of our water is used for outdoor irrigation. And that's been pretty consistent over the years. And then again, on a per capita use, we are seeing a slight decrease of water consumption in our community. Both all community uses, so all those sources combined, but also when we look at the billed consumption, so the amount that people are actually getting billed for, these are both decreasing at a slight rate. And last but not least, our last category is called natural systems and ecology. This is the living things category, plants and animals, and natural systems. And so some of the work here, we expanded residential bear-resistant trash cans. We're supporting Visit Durango and a lot of the work around dark sky initiatives. ongoing fire mitigation, we're updating our forestry plan, and continuing to add and maintain those open space areas around our community where our community is interacting with those ecosystems. And we saw, opposite of transit, we saw a big spike in outdoor visitation to our open space areas during the pandemic. That dialed back in the years following, and then now we're starting to see an uptick in those areas. And so visitation obviously has impact on those areas as far as, plants and wildlife and erosion and things like that. So this is one of the metrics that we track to see our impact on the ecosystems. That's all I have. Hopefully that wasn't too quick. Happy to answer questions. And yeah, and if you could also, or Clancy will probably say the QR code, that sort of thing.
We can go for it, Marty.
There's a QR code. Tell us how we did it.
That's about it. Yeah. Thank you, Marty. We're going to jump into questions here in just 1 second. I also wanted to, first of all, thank you, Marty. Big round of applause for Marty. We also have, for those of you who it's tough to show up in person, or in addition to showing up in person, we also have our Engage Durango website, which is new as of March, really, end of February. So if you haven't checked that out yet, it's at engage.durangoco.gov. You can find it on the City of Durango website as well. There's a link there. But it's a great spot to, we have a highlight right now is we have a quick poll for the Midtown Safety and Connectivity Project. We have a survey up for our strategic plan. So check it out. There's a lot of different projects featured on there and ways that you can engage on projects on your own time when you're laying in bed scrolling at night, for instance. So,
No, that's what I.
yeah, that's what I do too. Anyway, the Scan Me, that's again for the survey for tonight. But we'll go ahead and just jump into question and answer. We'll have about 15 minutes for that if needed. So, Carolyn.
Thank you. I have a question about, I've heard La Plata Electric used to be capping. They didn't want more than 5% of the energy coming from personal solar panels. Is that cap still there, or did it go away? And how close are we to, I'm considering solar panels for my roof, and I don't know if they're going to allow me.
Yeah, great question. I'll repeat the questions, and then also, I realize it went a little long, and, okay, cool. So I know some of you aren't even here to see me, you're here to talk to someone back there. So if you have any questions and we don't have time to answer your questions, again, I will be here, stay happy to answer any of your questions, but great question for the room. So the cap on renewable energy or solar production for LPEA was related to their contract with Tri-State. So that won't be an issue in 2 years. They are in 2 years, they are officially exiting Tri-State. It was never a cap on on-site solar. So we never had a limit on the amount of on-site solar that we could install. That cap was only the amount of solar that LPEA could install, like utility scale solar, that LPEA could install separate from what they were getting from Tri-State.
Oh, I see. Good.
There is, as you may be seeing in the news though, we are actually hitting a point on some of our zones within the electrical grid in our community where daytime solar production for on-site solar is more than that substation zone is using. And so we're actually hitting 100% daytime solar in some zones in the city of Durango, which is great.
Is there a map to show?
There is, yep, LPA has those maps, and so when you apply for on-site solar, you have to go through that application process, and they show you what zones that you're in and how that impacts your application process.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
so more batteries, yeah, and more solar in commercial areas.
Yeah, Marty, I'm wondering how you might reconcile some of the city's plans for housing developments, workforce housing, and with the need to also reduce carbon emissions and achieve carbon neutrality because the housing brings in more traffic and so forth. How do you think we reconcile that?
Well, if they don't live here, they're going to live somewhere. right? And so we can't necessarily have a goal to achieve carbon neutrality that uses an approach of just keeping people out, because they will still have emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, environmental impact, regardless of where they live. And so I think this is personally, and in the realm of sustainability professionalism, it's acknowledged that exclusionary sustainability is not equitable sustainability. And so we have to, as a community, consider affordability along with the fact that, and growth, which is going to happen in communities, alongside our goals for reduction of consumption of resources. And so it does make things harder. The more people we have, the more people would be consuming energy, would be consuming water, things like that. And so it means that we have to be more aggressive in our tactics for efficiencies and reductions. And so, but it's a hard issue. But yeah, I would remind, I think when I get that question, like, we want to be carbon neutral as a community, but we're growing. Well, again, that person, they're either going to live here or they're going to live somewhere else, and they're going to be driving, they're going to be using energy, they're going to be consuming water, they're going to be doing those things regardless of where they are. And so I think we have an obligation to tackle both simultaneously.
Marty, I'd heard that the state was going to start phasing out or banning products with so-called forever chemicals.
PFAS.
So I was wondering what you knew about that and how that might roll out here.
That's a really good question. So the question was about PFAS, or forever chemicals. And I have been following that. I don't see anything about that legislation that would impact city code, city enforcement, city waste management procedures. It could have some impact maybe on businesses that produce those or distribute those materials. I'm not directly familiar with any businesses that like do that kind of manufacturing or have those type of practices in Durango. I'd also add,
a lot of outdoor wear is coded in it, so
it's
going to be interesting how we handle it.
Yeah, absolutely. So it could be that they are required to no longer purchase or have those in their supply chain. But I don't. The only one that comes to mind, this isn't in city Durango, but like Four Corners River Sports, or like Alpaca, which is over in Memphis. They do actual manufacturing, which is my understanding of where that is going, is it's targeting the manufacturers. But I have to plead a little bit of ignorance. I'm not super familiar with all the ins and outs of that legislation. Yeah, sweetie.
Marty, I would hope that the city of Durango would work with restaurants and make I don't want to say a deal, but give them an incentive for composting as well as cardboard recycling, because many restaurants do not compost. It's too expensive, they have to have another employee. But if there was some type of incentive, then I believe the restaurants would get on board, and also increase your recycling numbers in the city of Durango.
Yeah, absolutely. So the comment was about composting and recycling at restaurants. Agreed. Yeah, definitely. That is an area that's probably the highest area of food waste, commercially speaking. And we do have some programs that address that. We certainly can look at expanding them. We have the Green Business Certification Program, which restaurants can sign up for, and they get incentives to, one of the things they could use the $500 rebate through participating in that program is for added composting service. And we just issued a Green Durango grant to carvers for their 100% composting front of house and back of house service. And so we're hoping to really capitalize on showing that that's possible and for them to lead the charge with the Restaurant Association on showing how that can be done. So yeah. Berger, and then Dave. Yeah.
You have 5 sectors. Buildings is not one of them. Despite that buildings is a major sector of greenhouse gases and a much slower turn. You know, people buy new cars every 10, 20 years. There's a turnover to electric vehicles. But with buildings, you have a much slower turnover. So why isn't this, but you talked about buildings and thermostats, it's not a separate sector.
Yeah, so the question was about the categorization of the sustainability plan and where buildings would fit in that. They really do fit primarily in that energy section. And so when we talk about energy, it really is energy in buildings. Water, certainly, water consumption in buildings would be another area. And so, thanks for bringing out that clarification. That's how it fits in my head, is the energy section really is buildings. And it's our energy consumption in buildings. And yet, how we design buildings now is going to carry us into 2050. And so those transitions to electrical, high efficiency buildings, all electric buildings, buildings with integrated renewable energy, that has to be occurring right now if we're going to be hitting our climate goals. And not only for new buildings, but then all the programs, the state and federal programs to then retroactively retrofit buildings to be more energy efficient, all electric, and integrate renewables. So it is, I agree, like probably the most important sector alongside transportation in for our greenhouse gas impact. Absolutely.
We're gonna do 2 more questions.
Okay. We'll
It
have
sounds
Dick
like
and then
2
Evan.
more, yeah.
Dick and then Evan. Oh, it's on buildings. Okay. Thematically, we're gonna go, and you can close us out.
I'll be quick. I guess I was wondering, along buildings, where is the city in updating its building code? The state's model codes are a lot more progressive than Durango's, and so I'm curious as to how that is factoring into updating the building code in the sustainability realm.
Community Development Director Scott Shine, would you like to chime in on this?
2015 IECC.
We have historically adopted building codes 1 year after they're released, because a lot of times when it's released, there's a lot of revisions and edits that happen that first year. So the 2024 code is out now. We've reviewed it. We're looking at probably 2025 adopting 24 codes. There are a number of different codes that you can choose from to adopt. We're also looking at the existing buildings code, which is something we haven't had in the past, about retrofitting existing buildings and reusing existing buildings. And also working with Marty a lot on the energy conservation code. So that's sort of been our strategy historically regarding building codes.
And I'll just add on to that, the state of Colorado is really taking, I don't want to say unprecedented, but very aggressive action in the building code space that I have not seen in recent history, and it's pretty interesting, the mix of what local municipalities and jurisdictions are given the flexibility to implement themselves. I think a lot of it is like incentivizing even more aggressive stuff, but then also the state is doing some mandating of like everyone's got to get on board and get up to speed. So it's not just, we are going to certainly do what we have our power to do, but we're also tracking the mandates and or incentives that are all coming down the pike from the state, because it's a lot and it's moving pretty quickly and aggressively. So yeah. All right.
One of my questions was, when is the next update of the greenhouse gas inventory to see how you're doing?
Good question. We just completed it. I didn't put it in this summary because it could be its own presentation entirely. but this is a great one to end on. Thank you for your question. So we are, despite 8% growth, we are down 10% in our greenhouse gas emissions within, yeah, it's good progress. And that's absolute value, that's not per capita. So absolute value of annual greenhouse gas emissions. We, City of Durango scope, bounded by our city limits, including the airport, we are down 10% absolute value compared to 2016 goals. That is driven by increases in efficiency in vehicles and significant decreases in the emissions factor of the LPEA grid. They're down almost 20% in their emissions factor compared to 2026. So those two areas really are driving that, and then plus the increase in local solar that you're seeing. So progress, still a lot of ways to go to hit our 50% goal in less than 6 years, but I'm optimistic, cautiously optimistic.
As usual, yeah. Thank you, Marty. Okay, Marty is going to be sticking around. So if you have any more questions regarding sustainability or his presentation, where are you gonna hold up?
Maybe I'll just stand up here.
All right, well, Marty, sounds good. In the meantime, before we jump into going around the room and visiting with folks, I would like everybody to introduce themselves as far as our city staff goes. So I'm going to pass this mic around so folks can tell you who they are and who they're with. Starting over here.
I'm Nick Stacy, and I'm with the police department.
What?
That guy? Communication Center.
I'm Tom Sluice, I'm the public information officer.
Maybe Gary, the airport director.
Good evening, Scott Shine, Community Development Director.
Allison Baker, Public Works Director. Kay Harmer, City Clerk.
Justin Carlson, IT director.
Kelly Schmidt, Parks and Recreation Director.
Hi, Sarah Hill, Transportation Director.
Laura Rick, Public Outreach and Education Coordinator for Public Works.
Christy Madrigal, city manager.
That's all right.
Oh, wait.
Come on down.
And Rob, AV analyst, research.
And good afternoon, Erin Hager, Assistant City Manager.
Hi, Devin Schmidt, Chief Financial Officer.
And again, I'm Nancy Nixon, from the Community Engagement Specialist. Okay, you are all released to go chat. Thank you all so much for coming. Don't forget about the food and drinks in the back. It's really helpful if I don't have to carry that back out the door. So thank you again for being here.